Man's got to have a code. A man has got to have a code, a line attributed to John Wayne. I'm Michael Smerconish in the Philly Burbs. Omar Little, the magnetic criminal in The Wire, he said the same thing. But where does that code come from? You're not born with a code. You have to learn it from mentors, from life experience. Young men today, where is their code coming from? From social media, from video games, from porn, from a home without a father? Because people seem to agree young men are in crisis, and the data bear this out. Girls graduate on time from high school at higher rates than boys. Women easily outnumber men in college enrollment. In the spring of 2025, 58% of all undergraduate students in the U.S. were women. Boys have significantly more behavioral and developmental issues than do the girls. Teenage boys, they have fewer close friends than teenage girls. Only 15% of young men say they have no friends at all. 15% say they have no friends at all. That's quintupled since 1990. Male suicides, they've risen faster than female suicides in recent decades, and at present, men commit suicide at more than 4 times the rate of women. Men's participation in the labor force, it's been going down for decades, while women's participation has steadily risen. 1 in 10 men, 20 to 24, 1 in 10 aren't in school, don't have a job, effectively unengaged. That's twice the rate from 1990. And that's just a sample of the data. There's a lot more data and statistics showing a downward arc for boys and for men, and all the while society celebrating young women doing better, but young men are more likely to get lectures on toxic masculinity. But think of it this way, women suffer by extension when so many men are off track. We owe it to the women to help the men. And all the data may be having an effect that's all too evident and gruesome from the local and recent news. For instance, look at this. Thomas Matthew Crooks, who shot President Trump at that Butler, Pennsylvania rally, was 20 years old at the time. Luigi Mangione, 26 years old when he allegedly killed the United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Robin Westman, the shooter who killed 2 and injured 21 at the Annunciation Catholic Church before committing suicide, was 23 at the time. And Tyler Robinson, suspected of shooting Charlie Kirk, suspected in that assassination, is 22 years old. Every news cycle, there's more evidence that something is going wrong, which is why today we're doing a special program. This hour will go in depth into the crisis facing young men. And you should know we planned to do this program before the Charlie Kirk assassination. But in some ways, it was inevitable, not that particular crime, but that something would happen between the planning and the airing of this program. And if anything, the death of Charlie Kirk, a young man himself whose life before it ended perhaps pointed toward a solution, makes the issue more urgent than ever. So, in the following hour, we'll have 3 guests, a powerhouse team of experts looking at the issue from 3 different angles. Richard Reeves, the founder of the American Institute for Boys and Men, he wrote the book Of Boys and Men, which investigates why the modern male is struggling. He co-wrote a recent piece in the New York Times comparing today's problems to the boy problem of 1900. Rahm Emanuel, former White House Chief of Staff, Mayor of Chicago, Ambassador to Japan, will be here to discuss the housing crisis and how the inability to buy a home is creating despondency in young men. As he notes in a recent piece in the Washington Post, young people used to believe that if they worked hard, they'd enter the middle class. Not so much anymore. But we start with Scott Galloway. He's been prescient in this area, an academic and entrepreneur, a noted speaker, co-host of the Prof G Markets and Raging Moderates podcasts, on top of which he's the author of the upcoming book, Notes on Being a Man, where he presents a path forward for men and parents of boys. The book comes out in November. Scott, I'm not going to give away the new book, but I need to read something from the introduction. You say, I teach a course called Brand Strategy, not the issues facing boys and men. I'm not an athlete, a politician, an ex-SEAL, or an evangelist. I have no training in the subject of boys and men, either as an academic or therapist. I haven't devoted my life to being a good man, a good citizen. When I was younger, my sole focus was on becoming wealthy. Being rich makes you rich. But having spent the past 6 decades in a male body while watching a parade of fake men selling distorted versions of what it means to be a man, I have some thoughts. Why do you care so much about this issue?
Well, first off, Mike, I just want to recognize that you have been on this issue more than any person on television, so I appreciate it. June 11th, 2020, Alex Kearns is trading options on Robinhood and errantly gets a mistaken email saying that he owes $730,000. And after furiously trying to contact the company and getting a series of automated emails back, he leaves a note saying he didn't want to burden his family with that debt and throws himself in front of a train. And that was, I went sort of down a rabbit hole on that. And some of the data you brought up was just so overwhelming. And it's really a larger metaphor for what is happening, or the relationship between big tech and our youth. And that is, we now have essentially 40% of the S&P, or the most powerful companies in the world. 40% of the S&P by market value is essentially companies that have figured out that what we thought in marketing, that sex sells, is second to something else, and that is rage. And they've essentially built the largest rage machines in history. And what we have is a series of young men who are extremely online, who have a lack of relationships and are up against this godlike technology with the deepest pocketed companies in the world, trying to convince them that they don't need friends. They have Robinhood and Discord. They don't need to get a job, right? They can trade crypto. And why would they go through the effort of trying to work out, have a plan, demonstrate kindness, demonstrate excellence, demonstrate resilience, to establish a romantic relationship when they have porn? So in some ways, Michael, I feel like Alex Kearns' death is a larger metaphor for what I believe our society, at the hands of shareholder-driven big tech, that we're planning our own extinction. 60% of people age 30 used to have a kid in the house, one child 40 years ago. Now it's 27%. We're not having sex. The number of young people 18 to 29 who haven't had sex in the last year, it used to be 1 in 8. Now it's 1 in 4. And any mammal that is put alone, you put an orca in a tank alone, it goes crazy. The worst thing you can do to a human is solitary confinement. You know, if you have dogs, you know the worst thing you can do is leave them alone. And we have a profit incentive to drive rage and convince young people that it's okay to be alone. And it takes an especially big toll on men. When women don't have the guardrails of a romantic relationship, they oftentimes pour that additional romantic energy into their friendships and into their professional lives. When men don't have it, they pour it into going extremely online, into conspiracy theory, into misogyny, and can oftentimes be radicalized. There's a cartoon, and it is a cartoon, of the poor woman in her 30s that hasn't been able to find a man. It's a myth. Men need relationships more than women. Widows are happier after their husband dies than when they were married. Widowers are less happy. Men live 4 to 7 years longer when they're in a relationship, women 2 to 4 years longer. It ends up that men need relationships much more than women. And the most powerful companies in the world are essentially trying to convince us that we can have a reasonable facsimile of life on a screen and with an algorithm. And it is enraging us and dividing us.
There's a biological aspect to this that you've noted in the past, and I know we'll note in the forthcoming book about brain development. Make that point. So 2 seniors in high school applying to college, and I'm going through this right now with my oldest. Essentially, the girl who's applying to college, a senior, is competing against a sophomore. The prefrontal cortex of a male is 18 months behind. It doesn't catch up until he's 25. He's also much more risk aggressive. He's also more likely to pursue dopa. He's just biologically at a disadvantage. And then you couple that with an educational complex that is biased against men. Boys are twice as likely to be suspended for the same behavior. Black boys 5 times as likely. 3/4 of people in K through 12 are women. Who are they more likely to champion? 7 of 10 high school valedictorians are girls. So your next guest, who has really been my inspiration, my role model around this, has some fantastic ideas around redshirting. But the reality is some of that risk aggressiveness that has served our country well, whether it's scaling beams to build the Empire State Building in 12 months, or quite frankly, some of that masculine energy you want when Russians pour over the border in Ukraine, some of that heroism and valiance and risk aggressiveness and entrepreneurship we want from our young men. Quite frankly, it's been turned into something very toxic online. But men
are biologically, quite frankly, just less advanced. Let me give you a scary stat. Two 15-year-olds, a boy and a girl, both sexually molested. One crime is no less heinous than the other. The boy is 10 times more likely to kill himself later in life. It ends up that while boys are physically stronger, they're emotionally and mentally much weaker than girls.
I want to say this, and I don't know that it'll matter that I say it or how many times I say it. We shouldn't be misunderstood. We are all for the success of women. I was raised
100%.
by and am married to a strong and successful woman. You say in the book, there's no such thing as toxic masculinity. That's the emperor of all oxymorons. What do you mean by that?
Where there's cruelty, there's abuse of power, there's violence. But we need to restore masculinity as a potential code that you were referencing in your opening. And everybody needs a code. Some people get it from religion. Some people get it from their family. You can get it from work. You can get it from the military. I'd like to think that masculinity can serve as a code for young men who are struggling to find some guidelines, some guardrails. And for me, masculinity is really three legs of a stool. One, being a provider. Men are disproportionately, unfairly evaluated based on their economic success, and they get a lot of their purpose and their self-worth from their economic success. I know you do, I do. And the reality is that 75% of women say that economic viability is important in a mate. It's only 25% of men. Men don't really care if a woman is economically viable in kind of the mating game. Protector. Think about the most masculine jobs, being the military, being a fireman, being a cop. At the end of the day, the whole point of
Did I lose Scott? Because I'm not hearing the feed. He's gone. Okay. Okay. We lost Scott. Let me just say this. Something you don't know. His book comes out in November, but he's, as I said, been prescient and so important on this subject. And I love the fact that there wasn't the, well, I'll talk about these things. I'm praising Scott, so I want him to hear this. I want him to hear it. Is he back? Can he hear me? I'm thanking Scott and his publicist for not playing the game of, hey, that book comes out in November. I want Scott to come back in November, and people can pre-order his book right now, Notes on Being a Man. He owns this subject, and it's a privilege for me to have Scott and to have Ram and to have Richard Reeves. So I don't know if you can still hear me, Scott, but props to you, and thank you, my friend. What are your thoughts? Okay, well, good. Thank you for that. Hit me up on social media. I'll read some responses throughout the course of the program. Go pre-order his book. Pre-order his book. For so long, men had the advantage. We focused on bringing other demographics higher and lost the men. Well, Corinne, you take me right to the poll question today, because it's time now, right, to identify, in my opinion, it's time now to identify the plight of our men as a group in need, alongside so many other groups that we've singled out at different times in our history and said, wow, what can we as a society, what can we as a government do to boost this group among us? Because it has ripple effects on everybody. Here's the poll question at Smerconish.com. Go and vote today. Ready? Do we need government programs that specifically address the struggles facing young men? I'll give you results at the end of the hour. Still to come, what does the housing crisis, specifically home ownership, have to do with the success of young men? And what happens when the American dream becomes unaffordable and inaccessible? Former Obama Chief of Staff, Ambassador, Congressman Rahm Emanuel sees this as the real issue. He'll be here in a moment. As always, don't forget, sign up for my newsletter when you're voting on the poll question for which Scott Stantis drew this.